There are many reports that Google's new generative AI assistant, named Bard, is starting to take over for the Google Assistant. And there are multiple signs that something big is about to happen with the Assistant, Google Nest, and Pixel products. But we don't know what exactly. We can piece together some of the story with three current news items though. Now the first one comes from Google themselves. In a recent report, Google restructured its hardware teams that are involved in the Pixel, Nest, and Fitbit gear. They combined them under a single leader, but at the same time, they also reduced their core engineering and their Google Assistant teams, each by a few hundred people. That's a sizable reduction for a company that released a reported 12,000 people last year. And just one day after those cuts were announced was a second announcement from the Google Assistant team, as they told us that 17 features were being removed from their voice assistant. The reason? Those features were relatively underutilized, and this would help the Google Assistant overall with quality and reliability. And recently, 9to5Google found some very interesting changes in beta versions of the Google and Google Messages app that uncover word changes as well as functional changes. Those suggest that the time of the Google Assistant is coming to an end and that Bard is replacing it. But we have countries such as Canada that cannot use Bard. We have Google Nest products without Bard, and we have seen so little of Google's upcoming digital assistant. So as we say hello to Bard, will we be saying goodbye to the Google Assistant? And could we be witnessing the end of another Google service? Hello Automators, thanks for tuning in again. I'm Brian from Automate Your Life, and my goal here on the channel is to help you save time and money in your journey to live smarter. So if you like that idea, hit that subscribe button. Some of what I'm going to say today is just coming from experience and research with contacts I have. Very little of this is set in stone, and we're still early in the process of moving to Bard. But to understand where we're going, we have to understand where we came from. The Google Assistant was announced in May of 2016 and integrated into the first app, Allo, shortly thereafter. It was brought to the Pixel phones immediately after that, and just a month later into the original Google Home smart speaker. Google led the industry over the next 5 years when it came to voice assistants. They led the industry in natural language processing, had the most languages available, were statistically the most accurate, and made giant leaps forward with the Google Assistant when it came to those special events like Google I/O. A lot of you will remember the day Google Duplex managed the entire phone call with a salon. It managed to make an appointment, and it sounded very natural at times with the odd thrown in to make people think it was a human. Google also showed us that their assistant could fill out forms, they added bilingual capabilities, and for the last number of years, I've been using it as a speech-to-text engine for most of my messaging. Google worked hard to make money with the Google Assistant beyond search results. They released their own set of products, with weird things like the Nest IQ camera having a short period with the Google Assistant on board. We saw Nest smart displays come out in 2018, and Google produced what was called Android Things, an operating system built so that companies could use the Google Assistant and more in their own products. That's where we got these great smart displays from companies like Lenovo. But around 2020, we started to see cracks in the foundation. The Google Assistant stopped getting so many new features. And in fact, we started to see reductions in features. Google actually canceled the entire Android Things operating system and have since shifted to Fuchsia, which they also look to be killing, or at least they have severely slowed down development. The Google Nest smart displays and smart speakers have been losing features for years, and the latest salvo of 17 features being removed by Google is just another example, albeit a larger one. And if you've been using the Google Assistant for the last 3 years, then you will likely have noted that it's slowed down and it's become less accurate than it was. It's just felt like the Google Assistant had lost its way. But that's not what happened. If you look at the history of Google, you'll see a lot of products that they as a company have killed. And we can even point to the latest ones. The Drop Cam and the Nest Guard security system are end of life as of April 2024. There's a lot of history of Google killing off products and not really supporting them that well on the way out. Or at least, that's what a lot of people will say. But let's take a step back and look at what happened when Google acquired Nest in 2014. That acquisition gave them products like the Nest Thermostat, the Nest Protect, a number of cameras, plus a few other products that have, for the most part, survived and been improved upon over the years. Now, saying improved upon should cause a few comments, which will be fun for me to deal with, but in general, Google has made Nest products more accessible. I'd say they've added some very nice design elements as well, some nice features, and while doing that, yes, they've killed some very important ones. But we can look back at the moment when Google announced that the Nest app would be coming to its end. Google was asking everyone to transition across from the Nest app to the Google Home app. And they quickly realized that there was a lot of people tied to the features in the Nest app, and there was a number of people who didn't want to move. On release of this information, they already had a pretty good policy on this because the user had significant time to continue to use the Nest app. They were stating that it would eventually go away. But since that time, they have not enforced everyone moving across to the Google Home app. They recognize that the features of the Nest app are not available in the Google Home app and have been working to transfer most or at least some of those features over. But still to this day, I get questions from people who have bought new Nest products asking if they can put them into the old Nest app because that's what they're still using. That's where Google forces people to come into the new Google Home app. And I have to say that I agree with that as a policy. They can't continue to build new products for an application that is likely out of date in a number of ways. So just looking at that single example, Google's actually started to take care of people better than they did in the past when sunsetting products. Even if you look at the 17 features being removed from the Google Assistant, there are quite a few examples of them being replaced with something else that you can use. It's not a perfect replacement, but at least a lot of that was thought about. Now let's move on to what we see changing today and where Bard is going to start coming into our lives. The 9 to 5 Google report that I referenced at the start of today's video shows very well that language being used in the Google app is shifting almost fully to Bard. In fact, the settings are the biggest indicator to me as they're changing to use the new term. Now, in my opinion, this is Google reacting to lots of the bad press that the Assistant has been getting for a while now. You guys have come and told me in large numbers that the Google Assistant isn't as accurate and it's painful to use and it's not reliable. And listen, I've experienced the same thing myself and have, for the most part, removed Google Nest from our daily lives in our home. And just the other day, I asked for a specific light to come on and it turned on a kettle with a completely different name. Sometimes this thing is insane. But there's another reason that the Google Assistant is being left behind. The truth is that the Google Assistant was being prepared through what was called Google Duplex to be more like Bard. Google wanted it to be useful for daily tasks like answering the phone, dealing with spam calls, or waiting on hold for you. They wanted it to be able to make reservations and fill out forms on the web, and really to become a more conversational voice assistant. And I'm here in Canada, so I shouldn't have access to Bard right now. But because I sideloaded a beta, I'm able to show you this. It's a generative AI experience. And I'm able to send messages through a very different speech-to-text experience. This isn't me dictating exactly what I want to say, but instead giving instructions to what they call a digital assistant. And I don't think that this generative experience is what we're going to get with every different feature that we use today. It's just that this is the more conversational nature that people have wanted out of voice assistants since they started showing up. This is where Google's been trying to go with the assistant, but it couldn't get there with that technology. And as it expanded on features and as resources at the company started to be tied up by the new world of generative AI, large language models, and ultimately a race to AGI, or artificial general intelligence, Google as a company could see the writing on the wall. They figured out 2 to 3 years ago that the Google Assistant wasn't going to be as powerful as Bard could be, and it definitely wasn't going to be as powerful as competitors were going to be able to bring to their own assistants. Now, I don't think that the Google Assistant will be fully left behind for 5 years. Google has too many products out there with the assistant on board, and they won't be able to just immediately sunset all of these products. Imagine the backlash if Google suddenly ended all of their smart speakers, displays, and lots of their phones. And they actually did it to a single set of products from the Fitbit lineup with the 17 features they just removed. But I think in that case, most people aren't going to scream that loud because that wasn't the point of the device, and it wasn't a great experience anyways. Believe me when I say though, many more people have bought speakers and more with the Google Assistant on board, and that backlash would be much worse. So Google must come up with a plan, and I think they already have it in place. They do have a number of options though. For example, number one, they could leave all the existing products just using the Google Assistant. Number two, they could upgrade all of these products to the Bard experience. And number three, they could do a hybrid. But the truth is, the new changes showing up in the applications, they tell us where we're headed, or at least I think it's very clear. The Google Assistant works this way today. Today, the device physically listens for the wake words. Then the device uses its microphones to listen to the request you've made. Then Google processes that on the device and sends it out to the Google Assistant service in the cloud. And finally, the response comes back with the speakers, the display, or other hardware providing that answer to you. There's no real difference to the way Bard is being deployed initially. And so that means your existing devices could continue to use what appears to be the Google Assistant, but actually be using Bard, or at least this new combined service. Google can deploy this without changing much. Your existing devices could be calling up the same service as people who have full access to Bard in the Google Messages app beta I showed you today. So even if your existing products do happen to become Bard-based, the experience is going to be very much the same. The problem comes in when we talk about newer features that are going to come to Google's products as a result of Bard. These are the features that will be generative AI based and will require some hardware on your device. It's very clear to me that the Tensor chips that Google has gone and put into Google Pixel phones for the last few years are there to take over some of this generative workload. And while that is not the way it is working today, that is part of the future. And your existing Nest and older Pixel devices, as well as things like the Fitbit lineup, will not be able to take that on. The best way I can tell you why this is based on the designs that went into Nest hardware. Now, the first generation of Google Home speakers and displays was essentially an internet-connected microphone with a speaker attached to it. There wasn't a lot of processing happening on device, at least not that wasn't based on interpreting what you were saying. The second generation Nest hardware became a little more sophisticated in terms of machine learning, and many of those devices do have some hardware that could learn over time. But even these more sophisticated devices, they were in the early design stages over 5 years ago, as Google has told us many times during launches that they had a 3-year development cycle. And we are over 2 years with a lot of those products, more in many cases. They just won't be ready for that future Bard experience. So the final question a lot of you will have is whether or not we're getting new Nest speakers and whether or not Google's headed down the path of providing us Bard in the smart home? That answer's gonna have to wait. We need to see more, but we've seen 0 releases for Google's smart home lineup under the Nest brand in the last couple of years. In fact, the Pixel tablet launch from last year lines up with my sense that Android is where we will see the first and probably the only version of Bard in the smart home this year. You could go today and install or sideload some of these apps that I've shown you, and that means Google's starting to prepare Android. But I see nothing for the Fuchsia operating system, and I've seen nothing from the Nest team whatsoever. Nobody's talking about new hardware, and I haven't seen any FCC filings that would suggest that something is coming from Google that mirrors any of those previous Nest speakers or displays. But I do think that we are, for the most part, going to be able to continue to use the Google Assistant, even if it's called Bard. And while we might lose a number of features like we're about to lose with those 17, Google's trying to make that experience as good as they can. Now, Bard is the future, and this is part of a larger trend in the industry moving towards generative AI. And you can find out more about that trend and how you will have a couple of options for digital assistants this year in the video that's up on screen now. That's where I talk about all the biggest trends happening in smart homes and in smarter lifestyles. Otherwise, thanks for watching today, and of course, live smart.